I wanted to just get this started right away. I'm going to hand it over to this session as Clean Energy, Economic Development, and Social Impact. So I'm going to hand this over to Daryl Brown, who's going to moderate this session. So take it away, Daryl.
Thanks, Maddie. Tanze, Anin, Wache. Hello from Treaty 1 territory. This is the home of the Inuit Cree, the Oji Cree, the Anishinaabe, and the Red River Métis. So very honored to moderate today. And today's session is how can Indigenous clean energy participation continue to be a major economic development driver for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities and peoples. So very, very honored to be here with you today. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to introduce our power panel, and would like to start with my friend and who I affectionately call Ogimao, Chris Henderson from Indigenous Clean Energy, and Troy Jerome from Senti Environmental Indigenous Services, Don Matabi Leach, National Indigenous Economic Development, and Shannon Medetawabin, National Aboriginal Capital Corporation Association, and Bill Williams from Nunavut Economic Developers Association, and last but not least, Hillary Thatcher, Canada Infrastructure Bank. So welcome and thank you all for being here with us today. So today we're going to have a power panel, and the power panel is going to be discussing two questions, and then we're going to turn to the chats. So I'd like to just start off right away, if that's okay. We're going to be having a key question quiz too with the participants, and so we're going to be putting that up on the screen for you. Right now, I would like to ask the first question, and it is, I'd like to ask each panelist, okay, so what do you believe are one or two major important economic and social impacts or outcomes from Indigenous participation in clean energy projects? And I'm going to pass the talking stick to Chris. I have my rattle, so here you go, Chris, your talking stick. Please take us away, sir.
Hey, thanks for your rattle, man. I got a big canoe paddle here. This is my handmade canoe paddle by an artist who made it. And as those of you know me well, I'm a big canoeist, so this has seen a lot of pristine water on a lot of Indigenous lands. So here's my big impact. It's economic, but it's also social. My first career was as a hospital administrator, and I worked in healthcare. And I believe if we do the right thing for Indigenous clean energy for housing, clean energy with clean fuels, clean energy with renewable energy, we will have a huge impact on the health of the country, of the health of Indigenous people and communities. If we make sure we do energy efficient housing, that makes sure that we don't breathe bad air in homes, that we make sure that wood stoves are of a high quality so they're not putting ash and particulate matter inside the home, that we're making sure that we keep mold in check so it doesn't contaminate people and the home, then what we will do is not only improve the health of people, but let's remember, the biggest single expenditure in our country is on healthcare. So if we do the right thing on clean energy and housing, we not only make life better for Cookums and Muslims and all people on Indigenous communities, Inuit, Métis, and First Nations, but we're also going to reduce our healthcare costs. And that will happen every year. That's my one, Daryl. Back to you. But I'm handing it over. I think I'm handing it over to Troy, my buddy Troy. Troy, I can't send you my paddle, but here it is.
Thanks, Chris. I got my sweetgrass, and it was beaded nicely. I'm not sure who gave me the gift, but this is my talking stick for today. I'm reminded of when the project we worked on in our community, a large wind farm project, and I think that going back, it was the youth and the young people that I thought we could have the most impact with. And we spent a lot of time to make sure that we were able to train as many people as we could. And at the end, we were very successful, I believe, getting the people out on the territory, being able to be a part of the project. And I think that across Canada, you know, if we continue doing the things like ICE is doing in the Catalyst, more and more young people will be coming to the forefront. And one day they will be the chief and they will be the councillors. And I think that by continuing to do the things that we've been doing for the past decade or so, Idle No More and all these kind of things, putting ourselves at the forefront of clean energy. And, you know, the number of projects in Canada speaks for itself. We are the true caretakers of the land. And I think by bringing more and more of our young people into the mix and to do these kind of things, we could change the world. So I forget who I'm turning it over to. It looks like it's going to be Don. Here you go.
Ah, thank you. And I have eagle feather, and I usually keep this beside me at my meetings, even my Zoom meetings here in this time, in this new world. I just wanted to say that I feel that building capacity is the most important thing that we can do right now in terms of clean energy. About a year ago now, the National or International Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development launched their first ever report on Indigenous economic development. And that report has all kinds of recommendations to the federal government, and they do these reports to their member states. So that report provides a lot of recommendations, but there's some things in there that we can do as Indigenous people ourselves. We don't have to wait for the federal government to do these things, but one of them is about building capacity, institutional capacity. And I'm really, really happy to learn of the Indigenous Clean Energy group, because one of the things that the report talks about is building Indigenous centers of excellence. And in those centers, you can learn or be a clearinghouse of leading practices, leading research, case studies, tools and templates that would help our communities make informed decisions. And I think that, you know, by sharing what's going on in clean energy with each other across the country and connecting those projects together, we would have a better chance to make informed decisions, to make better partnerships, to really be leaders in this industry, because we would be looking at the leading practices in Indigenous businesses involved in clean energy projects and our employees and how to manage these projects, all of the information that we would need to support our communities. So you know, learning that there's this entity, and I think making it so that it can help to be that clearinghouse of important information for our people, I think that would go a long way towards helping our communities, helping our people to be leaders in clean energy. And now I think I'm passing, let's see, who am I passing the feather to? I have
Shannon.
it here. Shannon, okay. So Shannon, here you go.
Okay, Troy, nice to see you here. I've got my my drumstick here, so that'll be my talking stick. It's me, which Mitsue. If I get to the end of it, I'm very happy to see you all. I think the question is what do we need? And I think I'm in the access to capital business, and I think that we can't do anything without access to capital. And if we wait for government, then we'll be waiting forever. We have more than enough partners in this world, and there's more than enough capital in this world. It's about aligning our community to the people that want to help our community. ESG is a big language right now, and $536 billion in projects that are in the north. Renewable energy is so important and integral to the future. And my dad says we got to think about Kwachi, which is we won't be successful in the future without thinking about our neighbor, and in this case, without thinking about the environment. So it's too much. Oh, and I'm supposed to pass it off to
Shannon. Yeah, you're gonna pass it to Bill.
To Bill. Okay.
Yeah.
Bill, you got it.
Thanks, Shannon. So I guess this is my talking stick, but I use this as an example. If you guys can see here, it's a bird that's welded and made in Cambridge Bay, and they actually had an interesting program there that won the Arctic Inspiration Prize to develop youth skills, where they had a problem. They had excess waste in their metal dump, and they wanted to do something with it. and they made a program for teaching the kids there some welding skills and getting them into skilled trades by making art, and it's all Inuit inspired, and that one's a snow bunting. But they make everything from giant muskox that are they're life size and just beautiful works of art. But it started with a community issue in mind, and I'm very fortunate in my role to have the pleasure of working with 25 Nunavut community economic development officers. And I can tell you, as a humbled guest who's privileged to live in Nunavut here with the Inuit and being welcomed here, I can tell you that Indigenous people and Inuit are the original sustainable developers. They never take more than they need, and they develop with what's with them and around them in the community. And so as a non-Indigenous Canadian and other non-Indigenous Canadians, I think we can learn way more about sustainable development from Indigenous people if we just would listen. And we come up with all these really crazy terms and whatnot, but really it's fairly simple principles that have been taught and passed down that for some reason colonial people who've grown up in colonial structures sometimes ignore. And so I see clean energy as one of the development opportunities for Indigenous communities, development corporations, social enterprises that will not compromise values and these sustainability values. And often most development that comes with a Southern context, as I say, and with really, which is a colonial lens, requires people to compromise on values. And I think clean energy development in the majority of cases provides win-win scenarios that don't compromise values and deal with the community-based issues, not from the top down coming from somewhere else. So that's really where I see the opportunities in clean energy development. And with that, I will pass my talking stick over to Hillary.
Thank you, Bill. I'm Hillary Thatcher, and I'm with the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And I have some sweetgrass from Treaty 3 territory in Northwest Ontario to use as my talking stick. I'm currently on the unceded Algonquin territory in beautiful Ottawa, and really privileged to be a part of this panel. And I just want to echo what everybody has said. I think from capacity building in youth to values, these are all important components of why clean energy and the work actually of the Indigenous Clean Energy enterprise is so critical and important, and it's timely, and we've seen much success. But I want to go back to what Chris was talking about earlier and the linkage to improving health through energy and through clean energy in particular. And when I think about health, I do think about our physical health and our physical well-being, but I also think about the general well-being of the community. And so clean energy in my lens and through my career working in public service in both Ontario government and the federal government has afforded many communities who have participated in developing clean energy projects stable revenue sources for which they can invest in their people, invest in better health care, whether it's cleaner stoves, wood burning stoves, or cleaner schools. And that is a different type of health, but it's all interconnected into the well-being of communities and generating revenues, as well as inspiring youth to new careers and new heights in the clean energy field, which isn't going away, and it's only growing as technologies change and grow, and we become more sophisticated in the ways that we can look at offsetting diesel in our communities. And so I think the forum's incredibly important, incredibly timely, and there's a lot of room to continue to grow and to think about the various impacts that clean energy can have on our communities. Thank you. And I'll hand it right back to Daryl.
Okay, thanks, Hillary. So now I'm going to ask us, our helpers here, to put up the key question quiz for the participants. There we go. So we're going to ask all our participants to click in and answer the quiz. And we're going to give you a few minutes to do that. And I just want to add in one of the things that I personally feel for one of the things that we can accomplish when we're doing clean energy is really, of course there's reconciliation, but there's also honoring the treaties and you know, I think that's a really important part of our conversation. So just want to mention that. And how are we doing with the quiz? Do we need more time? Or should we go to the second question?
I'd go to the second question, Daryl, and come back to it after. We can remind people after the second question to fill it out.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And so, I'm going to find the second question. If you want to achieve even great economic development and social impacts from clean energy for every Indigenous community across Canada, there are one or two key strategies or actions we can take together. Collaboration between Indigenous communities, government, private corporations, utilities, and financial firms. I wanted to get your opinion on that. And we're going to start again with Chris.
Thanks, Daryl. I'm going to bring up my my paddle talking stick here. So pretty big, kind of hide behind it, eh? Just two things I put out. I want to first, to the point that both Shannon and Hillary had talked about. Look, capital counts, money counts. And I think what we do need to do is to look at how we look at Indigenous infrastructure that's sustainable, both into the demand side, which is on housing and transport with electrical vehicles and charging systems, and also generation. So I think we need new models of how financing is going to catalyze that. And it can't be only government. It's got to look at financing where government may play a key role, but it also has to bring in private capital. So that's the first big opportunity, I think, on the economic development side. The second opportunity, I would say, on the economic development side is that I like to see more Indigenous-owned clean energy businesses. Businesses that are creating new ventures in areas that we haven't thought about yet. You know, I'll let him talk about it, but it could be Troy talking about hydrogen. It could be talking about new technologies. It could be using artificial intelligence technologies. I think that Indigenous young people who are being trained, and you may have heard about our Generation Power program will be launching at ICE later this spring, which was profiled this Wednesday. So having young Indigenous people become entrepreneurs and business people living in their communities or living elsewhere, but partnering with others, so they're creating businesses in the clean energy space. So my two things, one is the new forms of innovation on financing and capital to drive infrastructure that reduces energy demand and takes action on climate. And secondly, helping catalyze the entrepreneurship of Indigenous clean energy and working with organizations like the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business and organizations like Shannon's and others. Thanks. I'm going to hand it over to Troy.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to be repeating something similar to what Chris was saying. I just think about the revenues that the project that the three Mi'kmaq communities of Giskebiga, Gisbeg, and Listowitch have significant revenues. Hopefully they will be able to bring a lot of benefits to local communities, but I keep thinking about how we could finance other projects. So if we got together somehow and we have all revenues or some of the revenues coming from other projects that we can invest in other communities' projects, and we can help like the early dollar monies, the innovation part of it, so that they could bring the project forward to a certain extent on their own, so they could own the project. They can have 51% and more ownership of projects in their communities. So that way they can make sure that the benefits are going to go to their communities more. They can ensure that when the project's being constructed, that their own people would be there having the employment opportunities there. So, and then from there, we'd be able to go to different organizations and bring other monies in. But I think that there's a lot of money that's going to be coming into Indigenous communities for the next decade or so. And if we can invest in other people's projects, we can hold each other up, and we would get to know each other better. And then, we could be owners with them, but we can vote with the Indigenous community. So I just keep thinking about how we could help each other, how we could use these revenues that are there now that are going to be coming over the next decade and invest into, real innovative projects. Because wind is pretty much over. There might be another round, as we get more and more clean energy, like what could be happening in Quebec. But solar and other things, and like hydrogen as well. We're looking at how can we use hydrogen as a storage medium. Well, this is going to take some innovation. And I think that, if some communities bring forward good projects, like the Mi'kmaq could look at their project and say, hey, we'd like to play a part in that. Let's bring some of our money and invest it in there. So I think working together across nations, right across Canada, talking to each other, having forums, maybe the Indigenous Clean Energy could be one of the forums that brings more and more people to understand how we can invest in each other's projects and what's out there. So I'll pass it over. I'm going to look at Dawn. Yes, to you, Dawn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, you know, I'm thinking about two words here: collaboration and capacity. And when I think of those, I think about our own project, wind power project in my region, the Ndomlising Power, wind power. And I often think of the development of that project. It was really difficult because our people didn't know too much about the industry at the time. And I think forums like this will help with providing Clean Energy 101 programming so people can understand it better. And I think of this being developed a few years back, that we missed some opportunities. We did have, I understand, one Indigenous business involved in providing services to the development of that project, but and actually their involvement opened doors for them. They're being called on to, you know, as a business, Indigenous business, to help in a lot of other projects across the country. Actually, they've been invited. So I think it's really good that, you know, that potential is there. But I know that we could have probably benefited more. I'm worried that a lot of the projects that we have are more passive investments, where we have partners that take on the major role, and so I think there's so much opportunity, again, in collaborating and building that capacity to be, you know, sole owners of some of these projects. We should be having those kinds of building those opportunities, and again, through this forum and through the entity of Indigenous Clean Energy as a center of excellence. I really do feel that there's some opportunities here so that we don't miss those future opportunities, and so that we're not involved in just passive investments, but we're actually leaders. Indigenous people can be leaders globally on clean energy. I think that that's our role as stewards of the land. So I really do believe that those two words are really important first steps to working together. We can learn from each other, from the successes and from the missteps that we've made in these projects. We know that that's so key. So thank you, Jimigwech, for that.
Thanks,
This
Dawn.
opportunity. And I pass this to Shannon.
Miigwech. I agree with Dawn. I think as Indigenous people, we have a responsibility to our ancestors to continue the focus on protecting the environment and ensuring that there is a world here for the future not yet unborn. My dad raised me on that we have to plan and we work for those that are not yet here. And clean energy gives us that opportunity to put into place clean energy projects all across Canada, but this has to go hand in hand with the infrastructure within our communities, because I think one of the comments on the chat is how can we have clean energy when we don't even have a good home? And this is the sad reality of our communities, is that we are well behind in ensuring that we have equitable access to homes and infrastructure, and clean energy is a piece of that. Yes, if we improve capacity for the old school to move on and our youth to take up the technology so that we can start to service new technologies and renewable energy, maximize our participation in hydro and wind, just like Troy did in his Mi'kmaq area. It's amazing projects and good examples of best practices we have all across this country. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. As we move from the fossil age to the renewable age, it's good that Indigenous people are thinking about becoming leaders in this area, because it's not just our community that's the market, it's the entire country. It's all of Turtle Island is the opportunity. And by putting into places mechanisms to raise capital, to move capital to good projects, and to build up the capacity of our youth, because in the community, people are still thinking about survival. We do business development, and getting a person to think about a business and a future is hard when they're trying to survive on the daily. So if we can create some ambassador programs in the community to build up the grassroots understanding of the opportunities that exist, then we'll see that trickle up of projects and opportunities and people going to school and learning about renewable energy and the services and the businesses that come out of it. So it's us practicing our inherent rights by ensuring that we have the services that sustain us into the future, so we don't have to rely on anybody. So this is going to Bill.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shannon. And I echo Shannon and especially Chris's comments on housing and you know, how do we inspire another generation when they're worried about where they're sleeping at night. And in Nunavut, we have a terrible housing crisis and with our public housing system. And it's been, you know, we have people who are ready, and there's some great people with innovative ideas and solutions who've presented at this conference on, you know, sustainable and passive homes. But we forget as economic developers that we're not just about starting new businesses, but providing quality of life improvement to communities. And to me, quality of life comes with, you know, jobs, recreation, and safe spaces in your community. And so I see, you know, renewable energy and clean energy in Nunavut especially is providing those opportunities for communities to improve quality of life. And that's going to be, you know, first and foremost through Indigenous participation. And so when I think about how do we move these projects forward, whether it be housing and you know, increasing opportunities for entrepreneurs if they own their own housing or have opportunities to own their own homes in Nunavut, that gives them more equity and more opportunities to leverage that to start those businesses. So how do we do that? And I think that's where we need to partner with not just the government, but also private capital and capital corporations and development corporations to really de-risk projects. We know these projects are work, they're fairly safe, and I think the benefit of this pandemic has been people have seen renewables and clean energy opportunities are sustainable investments, and they perform better than most during, and especially better than oil and gas during this whole time. So actions I would like to see is those partnerships, and you know, it doesn't always have to be through government, but programs like the IODI program that builds that capacity, like Don was talking about through the 2020 program. But then that capacity, instead of putting people off and saying, go find your own money, you know, giving them that seed capital and those opportunities of resources. So they're not spending more time looking for the financing. They're spending more time on pushing their project forward. And so opportunities like that could be partnerships with the government and private industry to really de-risk those projects and provide those opportunities will really push forward Indigenous clean energy development in Canada. And I'll pass the stick to Hillary.
Thanks, Bill. Those are all really important points. And I think, you know, when I go back to the question, you know, I go back to Don's comments on collaboration and, you know, not being the passive investor. I also think about, you know, the project, Don, that you were referring to in Manitoulin Island. I think it was, you know, it was one of the first in Ontario, actually, with First Nation partners. And there is a lot of learning, and that's where that collaboration comes key. And, you know, it's about sharing between our communities, whether they're First Nations, Métis or Inuit, so that we can learn from, you know, some of the obstacles that the communities face, some of the challenges, and what they would have done differently had they, you know, had a shot at doing the same project today, because that's how we can build better. And do it in a way that reflects the community's values, but also has the community's thinking about, you know, and I would say that those weren't passive investments in that project. There was a real effort to make sure that there was jobs on the ground for community members and that they were really a part of the development of the project. But, you know, hindsight's always 20/20, and could they have been much more actively involved as investors? The piece that I really wanted to focus on is also this whole idea that, you know, when I think about clean energy, I think about it in two senses. I think about the community-based infrastructure that's needed in so many communities, remote communities that are currently serviced with just diesel. Daryl, you and I had a conversation earlier in the week about a community you're working with, and there's many communities across Canada that just rely solely on diesel. They may have different needs than a community that's looking to build a large project to feed into the larger system of the province or territory for which it exists. And so the investments might look different as well. And so, you know, in my work at the Canada Infrastructure Bank, we look at both of these types of projects, the smaller community-based projects, but also the large transformational projects in provinces and territories that are needed to get us to a cleaner environment and to manage GHG reductions and you know, get off coal, frankly, and the non-renewable types of energy that supplies so many of us. And so when I think about community-based infrastructure, and I'm quite seized with this at the moment, you know, I think about those communities that are currently serviced with diesel, and what, you know, the piece that I think, Chris, the work that you're doing and the work of ICE is critical so that we better understand as communities who are looking at getting off diesel or offsetting diesel, what are the options? And in some cases, it may be a transmission line. We're working on a transmission line right now, a project with the Métis and Inuit Association and Saco Investments to serve a transmission line that would serve 5 Inuit communities in Nunavut. It would be the first land-based connection. And it's looking like a viable project from an economic perspective, but also as the best way to provide affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy to those communities. But it's not a reality that all remote communities can look to. Transmission is very expensive. It's not always the best source of clean energy. And so some communities are going to be looking at solar, microgrids, battery, potentially hydrogen. And so we need to, I think one of the ways that we could collaborate is better understanding what are the options and what's the best option in my community. If I'm in Johaven or if I'm in another remote First Nation. So I think there's a lot of work that's going on, and I know that the work of ICE is so critical in that it's about sharing that information. It's about building the capacity at the youth level and at the community level so that communities understand what the options are. Because, you know, we do have options to offset diesel to 30%, maybe 40%, 50%. But how do communities think about what are their longer term strategies to get off diesel? And is that an option? And how do we build, you know, in a gradual sense, if that's what's necessary to get ourselves into a clean environment? And, I would be remiss if I didn't respect the comment about, you know, how do you move down this path when you're struggling with like poor quality housing and you know, and there's different tranches of work that need to be done across communities for healthier communities where, you know, they do have access to recreation and, you know, better infrastructure. And so I just think that, you know, it's not a simple answer, and access to capital is going to be a key component of this. But that collaboration piece, coming full circle back to Don's comments, is going to be critical so that we can learn where the investors are, what the investment opportunities are, how the communities can get involved, where communities can invest in other communities' opportunities. You know, these are the kinds of things that networks like this afford us to have, and look at those opportunities in a really comprehensive way.
Thanks, Hillary. That's great. These are all good answers. Really interesting comments too coming in the chat. So right now we're going to take some questions from the chat area, and the first one I have here is, do the panelists have any recommendations or ways to engage youth and methods for developing effective clean energy programming for community members and youth? And Don, did you put your hand up? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, one of the things, you know, I've been thinking about is, I'm not sure if I saw it on the website for ICE or somewhere, but I thought I saw the number 152 Indigenous clean energy projects in Canada currently. And I thought, wow, what a great source of support for Indigenous youth. Why can't we look at some internships? It's in some of these projects right now, especially in different levels. Why can't we use those existing projects to teach our young people and to just expose them? Because a lot of the youth that we have all they see is what's in the community sometimes. They don't see what they don't what they haven't experienced. They don't know what they don't know. So why can't we do some internships within those existing 152 projects that exist across Canada? And of course, I think if we had really good bursaries in this area to support our young people at the post-secondary level in engineering programs, I think that would be great. The other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about and is that one of the other examples that I've seen around the world that really works well is in Australia. They have this organization called Jawin, which means friendship. And that's where they have people in corporate Australia where they send middle managers to work in the communities to help do the training for, in this case, Clean Energy 101. So they could go into the communities, they could help the communities with that, not only learning about the industry, but even doing business plans for them or strategies for them. So they lend staff for 6 weeks to Indigenous communities and teach about these different areas. I think this would be something, I could see it happening in all sectors, but for sure in the clean energy sector, I think it's something, a real step that we could take that would make a difference. So those 3 different things, a youth could be assigned to work with the representative as well who comes in. I think they could learn a lot. So there's different things that we can do.
Nice. And Don, you're going to pass the stick to Chris, please.
Okay, there you go, Chris.
Hey, Don, right on. One of the things that we try to do in ICE with the programming like the 2020 Catalyst program is educate catalysts so that they include youth in the clean energy program planning. And by the way, the numbers are higher. We're now actually almost at 200 medium to large clean energy projects owned or co-owned by Indigenous communities, and almost over 2,000 small projects. These big numbers, and the growth has been there. So I want to do a shout out to great catalysts like Kara Sanders, who's including youth in education in the info fair she does in Northern Ontario, or Siobhan Slade, who's doing the same thing on the north coast of Labrador. But the really thing we're excited about, and we'll make sure you all have it, is that we will launch in April Generation Power, which is youth internships, Indigenous internships for clean energy. But it's going to be very unique. And we had a whole profile on it that was done Wednesday of this week. This will be done where they will be placed into corporations and energy companies to learn for a year, but with cultural support, with personal support, with coaching, and with clean energy support. But also the companies and organizations that choose to participate, they also have to go through Indigenous training. It's part of the cultural training of change. So I'm really excited about Generation Power. This is going to be a huge force for change coming up. And but I think you're so right about youth involvement. Great question out there.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So there's another question in the chat. Can you tell us about the investment vehicles that you have seen communities use to invest in their own and other communities' renewable energy projects? I'm going to open it up. Anyone like to take that? I'm thinking, Shannon, go ahead, sir.
Well, I was doing some looking around, and there are some people that are doing in some regions. I think Alberta's got Alberta Investment Fund. They've got the Opportunity Corporation. So there's different funds being put together to attract private sector capital. And I think that's kind of what they need to do for the renewable area, is a renewable energy fund that would allow the private sector to invest into a fund where it would be applied to those projects that are happening in our communities. You're at the 200 project number right now. From the database, it looks like about 183 communities are still on diesel, so we still got a way to go. And I'm sure some of them are working on transmission lines. But I grew up on diesel. I know about the delay of 4 to 2 days to get it fixed up. So those communities, I don't envy them still being on diesel. They need to find a resolution to that. But then putting in transmission lines, which is old technology, and it's not entirely low cost. Communities where I'm from, where we've been on a transmission line for 25 years, it's still very expensive for electricity costs. It's $500 on heating your home. How can people afford that for very long? So you got to think about renewable energies to supplement everything that you have out there. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg, and we just need to ensure that everybody understands what renewable energy is. And as technologies get added, then everybody's in the know. And the program that Chris was talking about sounds like a great program, but ambassadors right in the community so that they can work with the community members and getting their understanding around renewable energies would be a good way to go as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. So, oh yeah, Bill, please. Yeah.
Thanks, Daryl. So I've seen here in Nunavut multiple different ways that projects have been funded, and depending on how they're being structured. But I've seen everything from IIBAs working with resource extraction companies to offset some of these projects, or in partnership, and also we've seen partnerships with the infrastructure bank and also with private pension funds and whatnot, and development corporations. So I think, again, the more partners you have, sometimes we think it's a bad thing because it's dealing with so many different pieces, but the more partners that are involved, the more de-risking it does. And I find it seems and Hillary might be able to talk to this more than I can, but with the power transmission line, is as soon as the infrastructure bank was on board, it seemed like it really de-risked the project and kind of gave it that rubber stamp for other investors to get interested in and really talk and build on that. So I think the government and funds like Shannon's talking about really provide an opportunity to help de-risk, especially in communities that unfortunately private industry is not aware of how they're structured. They might have this idea that because it's on reserve or in Nunavut, they don't have any recourse, or they don't understand how it works. But by partners like the infrastructure bank or capital corporations being involved, it helps educate private industry and private finance about how to really move projects forward and how they can participate and still have a secure investment. So it's really building those partnerships and those collaborations like Don talked about, and really kind of hashing out on a financial level those projects. And Chris has talked about this in the past, but that was just kind of my 2 cents I wanted to add there, Daryl.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So yeah, I'll go to Troy and then Hillary, please.
I'll make mine quick. I just wanted to say that when you're bringing in other partners, if the project's large enough, the resource that we bring as Indigenous people is the land, and it's the wind or the solar or what have you. So when we built our project, we made sure that we told the potential business partners that were going to come with us is that we're bringing this project forward. It's going to be on our territory, and the wind that flows over our territory also belongs to us. So those that are ready to recognize that the resource itself is from Indigenous lands, from Indigenous people, you can come and have a seat with us. If you think that we don't own that, if we're not bringing that to the table, then don't come sit down with us. And everyone came sit down with us. So I think that we need to remember that when the project's on a territory, the land is ours. So that's something that we bring to the project. And when the wind flows over that land, that's ours as well. So I just wanted to put that out there that, when you're trying to finance the project, it shouldn't always just be clear what bank rules are. Tell your business partners that, we're bringing this resource.
Good. Thank you, Troy. Go ahead, Hillary. Oh, then we'll go to Don. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Troy, that's a great point, and something that more and more developers and renewable generators do consider, certainly in all aspects of the projects. The one thing, and I'll just to echo Bill's point, the Canada Infrastructure Bank was created in part to de-risk projects. So we can take a riskier position in projects so that we can attract private capital where they wouldn't otherwise play and spend time. And so, that's the other part of our role, is to crowd in private capital. And we do that by taking a longer view of the project in our investment sometimes, or just taking on different types of risks that, as I said earlier, other financial and institutional investors may not, come to the project otherwise. So that's one piece of it. The other piece, and I noticed it from a question earlier, a comment earlier in the chat around trust, is that the trust funds of so many communities, and not all communities are sitting on trust funds, but they're all structured a bit differently. And so, if there's opportunities for communities to make an actual investment in the project with cash and with some capital, that can also help. And in the comment in the chat was around trust might need to have some legal restructuring, and that is true. But that's the kind of capital that, you know, I think when I think about what Dawn was talking about, taking a passive position, I think when you have that kind of a stake in the game and you're making a commitment, like in the case of the transmission line up to Nunavut, where the Inuit have actually made a commitment to putting in capital, like the Oneida Battery Park that's been announced last week between Six Nations and Enerstor. Six Nations is putting up capital. That gives the community a very strong leverage and say in the project in terms of jobs and real economic growth for their community. They have a say in where and how the project is built that respects their values. And so, you know, where it's possible, you know, and Daryl, again, we had this conversation earlier in the week with a community you're working with, where it's possible for communities to be thinking about their own investments. It also helps, you know, with their stake in the project and all of the positive impacts it can have in the community, but it also, you know, can help private investment and private developers to see that the community is leaning in and really believes in this project as well and sees it as important and is willing to make a play on that project. So I'll just kind of leave it at that, but I think it's, you know, they're really important points, and it's not one size fits all for all communities, and everybody has different levels of capacity, either capital capacity and the ability to make investments. And we have to sometimes be creative, but whatever we can do to attract more private capital at lower and affordable rates, that's that's certainly the goal for and will help move the yardsticks in the clean energy space.
Yes, and Hillary, thank you for that. I just wanted to say that one of the things that I've been thinking about as well in these centers, or what ICE could do, is case studies on financing models, because if you're talking about over 200 Indigenous clean energy projects, I'm sure that there's at least 50% of those the models of financing have been different. People, again, need to see what those models are like, or what the potential could be like. We know that there's some regions in Canada where provinces or territories have a program in place, but not everybody knows about that. And what can we do to share? I think that would be a great place to start, is documenting how these models got established. Put together that research, and I could tell you that we could collaborate with academia on this. They're waiting to do case studies for us in different areas. And if you didn't know, we have over 300 PhDs in Canada, Indigenous PhDs in Canada. And I think we should take advantage of academia to do this research. Some of it can be done very little cost or next to nothing to get these case studies done. Why can't we take on a project to do case studies on the financing models that have been established out there, and potential financing models?
Yeah, those are all great points. So really good discussions here. So I'm going to say we go to the poll results then. And I do have a final question to wrap for all of the panelists, but let's go see if we can see the poll results now. There we go. So we're very interesting. Mentorship youth is the most rated there. And then you've got some, what do you make of that, Chris?
No, it's capacity building's number one. So very much the
yes, capacity building. Yeah. I didn't get down there. Oh, now I see it. Okay. Now, interesting. So I'm going to go to the last question for all the panelists now. And we're going to ask in the order that we started with, what is the greatest vision you have for Indigenous clean energy? And what is the offer Indigenous peoples and communities can make in terms of economic development and social impact? So we'll start off with Chris, please.
Darren, I'm going to go to the question I put in the chat. I think what we need to do now is plan now. So we'll be done COVID in about 6 months' time. So let's make a commitment to get together, Indigenous communities and governments federal and provincial and territorial, capital markets, financial firms, energy corporations, utilities, and look at how we catalyze a major scale up in investment and funding and development of Indigenous clean energy infrastructure. We need now the big plan to move forward faster. I'd underline homes and energy efficiency, diesel reduction, and electrical vehicles and sustainable transport. So that's my grand vision that I hope we embrace, and we'd be willing to take a role with that at ICE.
Excellent. Troy.
Yeah, I think about hydrogen. I've been thinking about green ammonia for a while, and the way we're get to green ammonia is using renewable energy to electrolyze water and take the hydrogen, smash it with nitrogen, and get ammonia, a energy storage medium. And hydrogen, Canada now has a hydrogen strategy. It's building around the world with all the renewable energy that we have in Canada. We can't store it anywhere. You know, we have a very hard time storing it, so a lot of projects don't get built because you can't store it. So I think about hydrogen and how we could learn more about it, and I guess tap into what Canada is saying in terms of their hydrogen strategy. It's inclusive. We see the Indigenous people can be included in there, but I think that we need to delve into that, understand it more, and bring more projects to the forefront, and have the Indigenous people, Indigenous communities be at the forefront of this next big generation as well.
Thanks, Troy. Dawn?
Yes, well, my vision is to build our own expertise and capacity as a way to be at the forefront of this sector in a more meaningful way, where we can generate the revenue to meet our community needs. We develop ownership models that incorporate social returns and wealth equally, where we have experienced Indigenous companies and employees building and managing the energy infrastructure. We are already building this capacity, but we need to share our progress and our missteps so that we can all learn to do better. We can share our successes with our Indigenous brothers and sisters globally as well. So this idea of the center and ICE taking a lead on all of this would be just tremendous. I think you've done a wonderful job this week, by the way, and I want to say miigwech to everyone in this most important work. Miigwech.
Thank you,
Shannon?
Dawn. Shannon, yeah.
I think, just to build on what Chris said, I think it's really important that the government change the channel on the fossil fuels focus. I think we need to give space to renewable energies because that's our future. As Indigenous people, we owe it to our ancestors, like I said before, to ensure that we're leading in this space. And if we can bring the government along to focus more on this and to jumpstart the investment, the creation of new instruments to attract private sector capital so that we can do more, and then focus on our communities and reducing the footprint of the garbage dumps that are there, the incinerators that are there, and start thinking about recycling and helping them recycle and look at their renewable energy project that's potential in their backyard and help them through that. I think ICE has a good role to play there in helping the communities in Canada.
Thank you. Bill?
So I've said this, I think, to Chris before, and yourself, Daryl, and Troy. I see clean energy as the transition opportunity for Indigenous communities to really prosper and develop. You know, how oil and gas and the railroad and resource extraction really built up colonial powers in Canada. Clean energy is that opportunity for Indigenous communities to reclaim that. And in Nunavut specifically, I see clean energy as the catalyst and the opportunity for dealing with our core infrastructure issues. Because without getting off diesel and limited resources that we have right now, we can't deal with the housing and the health impacts and really improving quality of life in our communities and inspiring those entrepreneurs. So my vision is to see Nunavut communities really push their own values and their visions and enabling, instead of coming top down from the government. We want to empower the communities here to work with what works best in their communities, and really and just be the supportive role when they ask for us and when they ask, not coming the top down. And thank you again, everybody, for having us today.
Sure, and I'll just end with, I think everything that's been said is, wraps up in summary exactly what I'm thinking. I think that ICE can certainly play a significant role And, you know, I would add on that, you know, inclusion of provinces, territories, and the federal government is critical, but also thinking about how they can be more active in a really strategic way of both deploying grants and funding, but also in terms of just understanding through a comprehensive review what the solutions might be for each community. For example, in Nunavut, it's not going to be the same solution for each of the 25 hamlets. And that's because they have different resources at their capacity. So better understanding what are the best opportunities and bringing that all together in a really collaborative fashion where, you know, youth are encouraged and we're collaborating and building that capacity. These are the future jobs in their communities, and it enables them to stay home if they want to live at home in their communities and work at home with good jobs and impactful jobs as well. So I think, you know, this has been a really great panel, and I really want to thank everybody for all their thoughtful comments. I've learned a lot from each of you as well. So I look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank the panel too. What a very interesting conversation. You're all leaders in this sector, so we really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. And we're going to sign off now. I just want to say that we're going to hand it back to Madeleine, and I want to say thanks to everybody. Really enjoyed the conversation. Love it. Yes, thank you.
And
Thank
hi, Shannon. Say hi to your wife for me too.
All right, thank you. I have my talking stick here too, so thank you so much. This is some Willow, and just like Daryl said, this was a very powerful panel. I'm learning so much and I'm taking so much away, and the one thing that sticks out for me from Shannon, we owe it to our ancestors. So thank you for sharing that. So thank you, Hillary, Dawn, Troy, Bill, Shannon, Daryl, and Chris. And if you want to come to the next session, which is a wellness break, you're welcome. And everybody jump in that session because we have a quiz and we have a prize for the person who answers the question first. And we'll see you in there. So let's teleport. Hi, all my relations.